Parshas Yisro. This week's Parsha famously contains the Ten Commandments and the description of Revelation. Before that, however, it describes how Yisro, who is Moshe's father-in-law, arrived on the scene with Moshe's wife, Yisro's daughter, Tzipporah, and Moshe's two sons, Gershom and Eliezer. The first verse seems to be without anything extraordinary other than a complete description. It reads as follows. This is Perek Yud Ches Pasuk Aleph. That's 18:1. The verse reads as follows: Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midian. And Yisro, the priest of Midian, Chosein Moshe, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard, Vayishma, Eis Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe L'Yisrael, everything that Hashem did to or for Moshe and Israel, his people, Ki Hotzi Hashem Es Yisrael MiMitzrayim, that Hashem had taken out Israel from Egypt. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. However, skip ahead a few verses, and again, the verse starts describing what Yisro did. Pasuk Hey, that's verse 5. Vayavo Yisro Chosein Moshe uvanav v'ishto, and Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, came with his, meaning Moshe's sons, v'ishto, and his, Moshe's wife, El Moshe, to Moshe, El Midbar, Asher Uchonesham, Har Elokim, to the desert where he was camping at the site of the mountain of God. Begins to be a little repetitive. It says, Yisro heard, Yisro, Vayishma Yisro, Yisro heard, Kohen Midian, Chosein Moshe. Why all of this detail? And then repeating it again 4 verses later, what is going on? So let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, Ma Shemu'ah Shoma Uva. What news did he hear that he heard it and he arrived? He came. Rashi says, Kriyas Yamsuf u'Mechemes Amalek, the splitting of the Red Sea and the fight against Amalek. And this is based on Medrash and Mechilta, also Gemara. The early sources cite a few possible reasons or things that that Yisro heard. Rashi selects these 2. So the Ramban and others, down to Torah T'mima, all ask, wait a second. The verse already says that Yisro heard, Ki Hotzi Hashem es Yisrael Mitzrayim, that Hashem had taken out Israel from Egypt. So why does Rashi, based on the Medrash asks the same thing, why does the Medrash ask, what did he hear? It just told you what he heard. Ki Hotzi Hashem es Yisrael Mitzrayim. He heard that Hashem took out the Israel from Egypt. So why does Rashi ask, Ma Shmuah Shoma Uva? So the Meforshei Rashi, the commentators say, Rashi doesn't say what did he hear. Rashi says, Ma Shmuah Shoma Uva, and he came. What's the key word there? It's he came, he arrived. How is that in contrast? What is that? Why is that exceptional? Well, there are a lot of people heard it. As a matter of fact, the Az Yashir, the song on the splitting of the sea, which we read last week, says explicitly that the people of the earth and the leaders, they all heard, they got frightened, etc. So everybody heard. So why didn't everybody show up? The flip side is, why did Yisro show up when nobody else did? Well, you could say that he was Chosein Moshe, that he was Moshe's father-in-law, and he had Moshe's wife, who was Yisro's daughter, and Moshe's 2 sons, so he's coming for a family reunion. But it would be sufficient to just start with Pasuk Hey for that, which we read, that says, Vayavo Yisro Chosein Moshe uvanav v'ishto Moshe. Yisro came with Moshe's wife and children. So what is it that caused Yisro to come? The verse is alluding to that. The verse is packed with descriptive detail. Yisro's Kohen Midian. Why is that in there? It's not mentioned later. Chosein Moshe, the father-in-law of Moshe, is mentioned later, but Kohen Midian is not. Kohen Midian means the priest. Now, some say it means that he was the political leader. Others say that he was a server of idols, and not only one type, but that he checked them all out. And he was the high priest of Avodah Zarah, of false worship. This is getting a little complicated. Why is that in there? Is that a positive thing? Is it a negative thing to say that he's Kohen Midian? The Meforshim explain that as Kohen Midian, Yisro examined all competing theological doctrines. avodah zarah. They're false. But he examined them all. He was knowledgeable. He was a seeker. And he sought after the truth. If he sought the truth, he wanted to know which of the items on the theological menu were most attractive to him. And then he heard. And what did he hear? Rashi says of all the things. And there is some discussion about whether this episode actually took place before Revelation, before Matan Torah, in the order in which it appears in the Chumash, or do we invoke the principle of Ve'en Mukdam, Ve'en Muchar B'Torah, that there is no necessary chronological sequence in the descriptions of the episodes or the narratives in the Torah, and that this may have happened after Matan Torah, in which case that might have been something that he heard and attracted him. Rashi clearly doesn't say that. Rashi says two things: Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, and Milchamas Amalek, and the fight with Amalek, which just happened at the end, or at least in the order of the presentation of the Torah. It's the very last few verses of the previous Parsha, B'Shalach, which describes the battle. Well, the verses before that as well, but the last verses describe the necessity to remember the battle of Amalek. But the battle of Amalek is described immediately before that, and then it says Vayishma Yisro. So it kind of we can understand that what he heard was the battle of Amalek. What's this business about Kriyas Yamsuf and the battle of Amalek? What about the 10 plagues? And there are those who say it was the mun, that the mun fell. What is it about Kriyas Yamsuf and Milchamas Amalek? Kriyas Yamsuf, we know, had more power than the 10 plagues. In what way? It was, you could call it a plague, but it was a decisive conclusion to the enslavement of the children of Israel. The plagues themselves were signs of the Almighty's power, and they caused damage to Egypt. They caused damage to the Egyptians, both to their bodies, to their health, their well-being, their lives, and also their livelihoods. But it didn't destroy them. Kriyas Yamsuf destroyed the capability of the Egyptians to fight against the Jews and to conquer the Jews. And it was a supernatural event. It was very impressive. That alone was insufficient, however. That alone may not have been sufficient for Yisro to be motivated to come. But then he heard about Milchamas Amalek. When did Milchamas Amalek, the battle against Amalek, take place? That was after Kriyas Yamsuf, after the children of Israel had left Egypt and they were on the trek. And then along came Amalek, and in an act of wanton violence, my Rabbi Rav Soloveitchik explains that, according to his grandfather, Reb Chaim, that Amalek describes not only the biological descendants of the people of Amalek, but it describes a motivation of people who are motivated to harm the Jews simply because they want to harm Jews. In other words, there's no utilitarian benefit. They may rationalize utilitarian benefit, but they're not sitting on land, that it's not for economic benefit, it's not for strategic benefit. They're a wandering tribe in the desert. It's because of a simple hatred of the Jews. Somebody who attacks the Jews because of a hatred of the Jews, not for a utilitarian benefit, has shares the category of Amalek. Yisro heard that the Egyptian enemy was defeated. He heard that Hashem also assisted the children of Israel in defeating Amalek. But what's notable about the attack of Amalek is that despite the Almighty's overwhelming and decisive demonstration of force and his power in destroying the Egyptian army, Amalek comes up and says, okay, we're going to take a shot. In other words, the Egyptians were finished, but evil was not finished. Evil was not banished from the world. Yisro wanted to be part of the battle. He understood, as a result of having examined all of the competing theologies, he recognized the truth of the one God, of Hashem. And he recognized that Hashem has a plan, and Hashem has a people to carry out his plan. Yisro wanted to be part of that plan. He wanted to be part of that battle. And we see in next week's Parsha, we see that Yisro, not in a self-aggrandizing or triumphant victory on the battlefield, but simply in terms of giving advice, counsel, guidance to Moshe. He suggests how to organize a judicial system so that Moshe would not get depleted, exhausted by handling everything on his own. So we see that Yisro is involved, and he wants to be involved. And what did he hear? He heard about Kriyas Yamsuf, which was the Almighty's overwhelming capability of destroying the enemy of the Jews. And he heard about Milchamas Amalek, which means that the battle against evil still continues. And Yisro wanted to be part of that. He was motivated to be part of the fight on behalf of the Almighty. Not everybody hears this call. Very few people heard it. One person heard it, There may be others, but we don't know about them. One notably heard it, and that was Yisro. The evidence was there for everybody to see. The evidence was there for everybody to draw their own conclusions. One man did. And he responded to the call. He showed up. He celebrated the victory together with Moshe. Moshe told him everything that took place, and it says, Vayichad Yisro, and Yisro was delighted at all of the details of the story. And then he participated fully in shoring up the people, shoring up Moshe, giving support to his son-in-law, giving support to the judicial system, and then he went back to Midian. There are those who say that he came back to rejoin the Jewish people. There are others who say he stayed in Midian either to influence others positively or something else. But the bottom line here is that he heard the call and he responded. Sometimes we hear a call that nobody else hears. And the fact that nobody else responds doesn't mean that we shouldn't respond. If we hear the call, we should respond. Have a good Shabbos.